So, ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome Roger Waters. You played The Wall live around the world. What made you decide now to put this on in stadiums, Roger?
Yeah, it took me a while to remember why I decided to put this on in stadiums, but I did remember eventually, and it was because I had a great yen to go back to South America, where I had done the Dark Side of the Moon tour and had a fantastic time. And in South America, because they don't play basketball or ice hockey, they don't have any arenas. So you either play in a sort of, samba club or in a soccer stadium. There is no alternative. And the Wall wouldn't really fit in a little club, so we had to play stadiums. And that's why we developed this show that we're going to Europe with, which has all this extra visual information to make it more watchable in a big outdoor space.
Well, I was going to say, I was at the O2 last year. It was a great show. But what have you had to do to top that show and to make it work in the stadium?
Well, the projecting surface is much wider. When we were indoors, we were this is all a bit technical, I'm afraid, but we were projecting over 8,000 pixels wide, and we're now projecting 15,000 pixels wide. So it's almost double the width that it was. I think it's like 130 meters or 140 meters across now that we're projecting on. So really that's the main difference. But what it means is, because it's so much wider, it gives us the opportunity to use the bits at the side where the hole is not, for IMAG and for imagery that we didn't use when we were working indoors. The content is by and large the same, but for instance in the arena show at the end of Brick 2, when when the underground train comes through, that's now like 500 feet wide instead of 130 feet wide. So it's just a lot wider. It's cool.
Fantastic. And you've already alluded to that was the Buenos Aires Stadium, the River Plate Stadium, because we'd heard this story that you came off stage and said to your manager, "I've got a real buzz from that stadium thing. Let's do stadiums in Europe." That was the kind of inspiration? That's true, was it?
That is not a true story. No, I don't speak like that, particularly not to him. No, I talked with Andrew Zweck, and he was saying there is definitely a tour in Europe. If you want to go outdoors in Europe next year, there's definitely a tour there for you to do. So you just have to decide whether you want to do this anymore or not. And we had such a good time doing it in Australia and New Zealand and South America and North America and all over, and England, and that I said, yeah, please, I'd like to do it some more.
Fantastic. We've got a whole bunch of questions. Some are coming online because we're obviously talking to your online audience as well. We're going to take one from the floor at the moment.
Scale of this show, does it mean that you won't be able to play festivals over in the UK at all? Is Wembley going to be the only show in the UK?
No, there are no plans to play festivals. You couldn't play this show at a festival. It takes. Actually, we're using a different roof in Europe, but the Showco roof that we were using in South America and North America takes like 26 blokes 6 days to build, and it takes up all the space. So it would be impossible to do a show with other acts.
We have an online question here, Roger, from Dara O. Aguilar, I hope I've got that right, in Mexico, who asks, what is the thing that you enjoy most when you were playing in a stadium rather than in a regular arena?
There's something, I hesitate to use the word triumphal, but there's something about connecting with that many people outdoors, which is actually extremely gratifying. And as I said before, when I was a kid, I did not get that experience. I didn't like it. Back in 75 and 77, when we were touring with Pink Floyd and we were playing soccer stadiums, I rather disliked it. It felt like we were very disconnected. But I think that disconnection was actually a projection of the disconnection that existed in the band, more than something about us and the audience. And so like in these gigs, you know, I often when we're setting up this gig, I go up to the very back of the stage. Say in River Plate, you talked about River Plate Stadium, and go up to the very back, and then we run some of the stuff and sit there, and I understand why the people up there feel connected with what's going on the stage and with the music and the emotions expressed during the show. So I don't know. It's just a bigger community. That's good.
Thank you very much. Another from the floor, please.
Can I take one there? Yeah, my name is Uwe Becker from the Ruhrnachrichten in Germany, Dortmund. I'm not sure if I understood everything that you said in the film, but I think you said that you would like to meet some politicians in your shows, that they might want to watch it. What would you like to tell them?
I did say that, didn't I? Whatever came over me. I think it's because when I was in South America, I met Pinero, who is the president of Chile, and I met, what's her name, who's the president of Argentina. So I met those two, and I had meetings with various ambassadors and people talking about various things. I was approached by a journalist in Buenos Aires who's trying to get the Falkland Islanders to allow DNA testing on the bodies of 123 Argentine soldiers who were interred in a cemetery there on East Falkland. And we are making some progress in that, but it was because of that I went and had a meeting with Kouchner in Buenos Aires. And she actually mentioned it in an address that she made on there just after we'd been there. So it remains to be seen. I did receive a reply. I sent a letter as well to Holford, Sharon Holford, I think her name is, who is the chairperson of the Legislative Assembly of the Falkland Islands, who actually, I assumed it was Whitehall who would be able to say, yes, you can send in this forensic team from the Red Cross to identify these kids. But it's not, it's the islanders themselves, and they're a bit wary of it. So we will just keep, exploring all diplomatic avenues so that the parents of these boys know which spot to go and put flowers on.
Another online question here, Roger. This is from Antonio Reyes in Spain, who asks, of all the songs you've composed during these years, which one do you enjoy performing most in concert?
Didn't he used to play for Arsenal?
Do you know, I wonder if it's the same one.
I think he did. Well, I'm very glad he's taking an interest in cultural matters. I think in this show, because of a lot of it is very enjoyable, but I think Comfortably Numb is probably the highlight. There's some stuff that Sean Evans, who's done all the animation that we use in the show, has done, which is so spectacular at a certain point in the middle of that song that it's always a big buzz. Though, having said that, sort of just before that, I've been in a hotel room singing Nobody Home, and I come out and I sing Vera, and I've actually, at front of the stage, I've just come out, but the audience are all looking at the screen like that, and it's this film of this young American girl greeting her father who's come back from the war, and it's extremely moving. So I get to look at the bit like this at the first kind of 10 rows of the audience, and there's quite a lot of tears going on, and that's extremely moving because I'm sort of anonymous, but I get to experience what's going on in the audience, and that's very moving.
Excellent. One more from the floor. I think we have one here.
Hi, this is Thomas from Vienna, Austria. May 12th, 2011, saw a very special performance of Comfortably Numb with a very special guest on the roof of the wall. Is this going to happen again soon, anytime?
I don't think so. No, I haven't had any conversations with David about that.
So
I think it's extremely unlikely. Yeah. I think by and large David's retired, as far as I can tell. But you would need to ask him that. So.
Okay, we'll ask him, yeah. But you would be keen of him showing up again in Wembley or whatever?
For me, it's nothing to do with me. There's nothing to do with me.
Okay. The last online question here for you, Roger. You've been touring the wall for 3 years now. What moment from the tour has had the most impact? Now, actually, you might have already answered that question by saying the moving scenes you see where people in the first few rows of the audience watching the film. But are there other moments which have moved you on your tour?
There's a particular gig that springs to mind, which was at Porto Alegre, which was the first show that we did in Brazil. So that was the first big Brazilian show, and the audience were extraordinary there, and that was very moving. But I think it's the half-time stuff with the veterans that I remember the most, because I invite vets from whatever country we're in, to come to the show, and at half-time I go and see them backstage, and we shake hands and do photos and sign stuff and chat and whatever, and that's often a very moving time, particularly in countries that have had young men in combat in recent years, like North America and Great Britain, obviously, and but all over the world. For instance, Brazil, I was talking about Brazil. I went to see the Vets Night, and I thought I was completely, had no idea what to expect. And I walked into this room, and they were all about 100 years old. And they were sweet. They couldn't have been nicer, and they'd all sort of volunteered because they were non-combatants in the Second World War, but a number of them had decided that they were going to go and fight the Nazis, and so they left Brazil and they went either to Canada or came to England or whatever, and so they were veterans of the Second World War there. I had one guy. I've told this story before, but there was one when we were in the States at one point. There was this older guy. You look around the room, and all the ones with no legs, and there's a lot of them, are all from the recent wars, from Iraq and Afghanistan, because these are all IED injuries. And then there are older guys, sort of my age, who are they're Vietnam veterans, And anyway, one of these guys, who was somewhere in between, stood in my way as I was leaving the room. And he looked me in the eye, and he put his hand out like that, and he took hold of my hand. And I sort of went, oh, glad you could come, because he hadn't been in the row of people getting photos or doing any of that stuff. And he looked me in the face and he said, "Your father would be proud of you." And I went, oh my goodness. And I was really knocked sideways by this man saying that to me. And I confess I struggled slightly before getting back onto the stage to compose myself. So that was a very, very moving moment. But it always is with the vets. We never speak politics, for obvious reasons.
Understood. We will take more from the floor if that's okay. Okay, gentleman here, sir.
Bulgarian National TV for Dennis and Friends Late Night Show. Roger, are there parts of the whole album that you feel you could have done even better? What would you do differently now?
No, I mean, no. No, the answer would be no. I'm not. I wouldn't go back and start doing it again. That's a piece of work that was completed. We go on working on the visual aspects of the show, and I have added one song. But and I added one song for theatrical reasons. It felt to me that there used to be 3 solos at the end of Another Brick in the Wall Part 2. And night after night I was feeling that the 3rd solo was a solo too long, a solo too far. And so I decided to drop it and put another musical piece in, which took me maybe a couple of months on the road, working it out in my head and then playing it and then figuring out chords on a guitar and then working with a band and do it to replace that. But I would never go back to a piece of work that I've done in the past, I think, and start trying to rewrite it.
So could we say it's pretty much immaculate as it is?
Say what?
Could we say that it's pretty much immaculate as it is? I mean, the album.
It's not really for me to judge. You guys, people who listen to the record or whatever, or who study it at all, have to make up their own minds about its value or lack of value. That's not for me to say.
Thank you very much. We'll take another one for Reynard Clay, who's in France at the moment. It kind of follows on from that question. This album has, well, this concept has clearly stood the test of time. His question is, why do you think it stood the test of time? I know you've had to answer that question many, many times. Has that changed over the years, the reason why you think people still keep coming back to it?
Well, the amount of time involved has changed because it's a lot longer than it was, you know. So it's, when was it, 1979. I just think people understand that it's true. That there's nothing. I'm not pretending anything. You know, I write what I feel, and so people get that it's real and that there's no artifice in it. There may be a little bit of craft in it, but there's no artifice. It's just an expression of how I felt about growing up.
Thank you. We'll take another from the floor. Here we go.
Hi, Jan Vedral from Czech Republic, Mladá Fronta Dnes. I'd like to ask about the new song you've mentioned in the video. Why did you decide to add the new song, and is there going to be something more in the future? Are you working on something?
No, I think it's very unlikely that I'll make any other musical changes to the piece because there's nowhere else in the piece where I feel that it lurches to a hole like I did with that. Like I explained with the guitar solo in Brick 2. The reason that I wrote the little song about Jean Charles de Menezes was because his family had sent his photo in. You know, on my website, I asked people to send in photos of fallen loved ones from all, and that was one of the stories that was sent in. Obviously, because I'm English, I knew the story anyway, because we all know the story of what happened at Stockwell Road Tube Station on that awful day. And then his family came to one of the shows. I think they came in Rio. Did they come to Rio or Sao Paulo? Porto Alegre. They came to Porto Alegre in Brazil, and so I met with them there. Was that before or after I put the song in the show? I can't remember. It was in the show, yeah. So that was a special night when they sat there and, you know, because he's up there the whole time. His picture is up there the whole time that we're singing that song, and I dedicate it to him. And I use that wherever we go. I try and learn. I shouldn't be saying this to you because you're from the Czech Republic. But normally, I try and figure out the phonetics of a kind of short speech in the language of the country that I'm going to. And a number of years ago, when I did my opera in where were we? Poznan. Yeah, in Poznan in Poland. I rather foolishly made a speech in Polish. And wow, it's so hard to make those sounds, you know, if you're not so whether or not I'll attempt this in the Czech Republic and all the other places that we're going to, I probably will. I talk about how, you know, wary we must be if we give our governments or the police of our governments too much power, because the descent to tyranny is a very steep and slippery one.
Thank you very much. Do you want to take out one more question? We'll get a couple more in, I think, in the time that we've got allowed.
Hi, Roger. I'm actually from Poland, so I remember your speech. TV and television. My name's Piotr Metz. Back in '79, do you remember having a feeling that even if the show was ahead of its time, the technology you had at your disposal was not up to your, you know, creative thinking at the time?
Yeah, the technology that we worked with in '79 was extremely problematic. You know, the projection systems that we have now, which are all electronic, the projectors are tiny, very, very powerful. In those days, we had 3 standard, you know, cinema-style 35mm arc lamp lit, sprocketed projectors running off an extremely archaic system called Maglink. We didn't even have a SMPTE in those days. And it was very, very unreliable and very, very difficult to keep everything in sync. And so yeah, things have changed an awful lot in terms of the technology of projection, which has helped me. and the other guys working on the visuals of the show hugely.
I was going to say, from a performance point of view, how does that work for you on the show? Is it easier to perform the show now, or is it still a very technical, very challenging job for you on front of the stage?
The show's much bigger now than it was then, and I think it is actually easier. It's complex, and there are more people involved in running the show, and obviously, if you're focusing 35 projectors, it's different than focusing 3, so when we set the show up, the last several hours of the set-up process are Richard Turner and his team of projectionists focusing. How many projectors is it, Andrew? 49, ladies and gentlemen. I underestimated when I said 35. It's 49 projectors. And obviously they all have to run in sync, and they're lined up to with a quarter of an inch. And for this new tour of Europe, I think we're not going to build towers, are we? Aren't we projecting from the back, way further back, to cut down on sightline problems that we had with projector towers being near to the wall. And so the projectors, there's a new generation of projectors coming out which we're going to use now, which means we can throw from a lot further away, which will be great too.
Okay, one more? 2 more. We have time for 2 more. Okay, we got one there?
Hello, I'm Bridget from Vienna, Austria, and I read on your website that you're planning to release the Heartland album next year. So what can you tell us about it? How far has work gone?
And I shouldn't have said anything about that. I can't remember when I did. When I was on the road during this last tour, I wrote one particular song which may be central to me making a new album. And I really don't want to talk much about it. As you know, I haven't made an album since 1992, which is a long time, 20 years. The reason I haven't done that is not because I haven't been writing songs, it's because I haven't found within myself something coherent enough that, like Amused to Death, was a very, very coherent and simple concept. And very easy to understand. Immediately you even heard the title, you knew what it was about, and it sort of hangs together. And I hadn't found a central kernel of an idea around which to hang a new piece of work. And I think I've discovered that now in this new song, but I don't really want to give it away.
And our last question, please.
Lucas Kaminski, Warsaw, Poland, daily newspaper, Gazeta Wyborcza. You spoke on The Wall being a relevant, still today, album having an impact on many people. I would like to ask you, aren't you saddened somewhat by the fact that after so many years after releasing The Wall, the world has not become a better place than it was back then?
Yes, I am. But I think it's very easy for all of us to see the little piece of history that we're part of that's going by in real time as we live, as shorter or longer depending on your perspective than it actually is. There have been changes, and I'm still largely optimistic that that because it's becoming easier and easier for us to communicate with one another across boundaries of ideology and nationality, that we human beings eventually will figure out the answers to the economic disparity that lies at the bottom of most of the fussing and fighting that goes on in the world, and that fuels the fires of both religious and political extremism. And also fiscal extremism that we see, and which prevents the majority of us from fulfilling our human potential to live good and happy lives, and to bring up our children so that we, by and large, change the world for the better as time unfolds. So although I would agree with you that we haven't made huge progress since 1979, I believe that we've made some, and I believe that we might be approaching a tipping point, you know. Which way we'll tip, of course, remains to be seen. But I think one has to at least try and cling to some kind of optimism. And interestingly enough, what was interesting about Postgate's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, which I took the title from to make my record, is that in the foreword to his book, he describes two bleak outlooks. One is the Orwellian outlook, the idea that, you know, we're all taken over in 1984 by the thought police, and books are banned and burned and whatever. And the other is Huxley's notions in A Brave New World. And he sees a future which I think is much more credible than Orwell's future, where you don't have to burn books because nobody reads them anyway. They're all too busy playing fucking video games. They're not interested in ideas. And that's what really scares me, is when you see these kids, you know, sitting. They sort of, you know, you get two of them sitting at a table and they're texting each other. You know, it's very weird. I find that very weird. You know, maybe that's just me being old, but that is scary. That's scary. So they are pleasured into non-existence, if you like, and that's frightening.
5 new shows announced today, Roger. Wednesday, 31st July, Athens, a venue that hasn't been decided yet. Saturday, 3rd of August, Istanbul University Sports Field. We've got the 11th of September, Zurich. Is that the Letzigrund Stadium? Have I got that right? 14th of September, Wembley Stadium. Apparently earlier on when I spoke, I put you in Wembley Arena. I apologise for that. It's definitely Wembley Stadium. And the 21st September, Paris Stade de France. Thank you very much, Roger Waters.
Thank you.